Welcome back to Module 1, an introduction to a Computer Security Operations Center and a review of networks. This is the second lesson of Module 1. In this lesson, we will cover common definitions for Computer Security Operations Centers and their associated terms. We will cover several terms that you will find to be familiar with. In the later lessons, we will go into more detail on these terms, but at this point, all you will need is to be familiar with the terms and what they mean. Here is a list of the terms we will discuss. A somewhat basic definition we need to know is what exactly is a SOC, or Security Operations Center. The purpose of a SOC is to provide a centralized location which can gather information from various sensors and locations that can provide a picture of the current status of the environment of interest. The term SOC does not have to mean a cyber-related security operations center. It is used in other environments in emergency management and the military. The phrase situational awareness is often used in relationship to a SOC. This simply means providing a picture of the current state of the environment being monitored. What is happening in the environment? Are we operating normally, or do we have a failure of some sort? Are we under attack? To boil things down to its most simple terms, the most important function of a security operations center is monitoring a network for security purposes and detection and handling of a security incident when one occurs. To avoid confusion when talking to individuals, you may be more familiar with the broader definition of a security operations center. We may use the term CSOC, or Computer Security Operations Center, in order to avoid confusion. In this course, we will use SOC and CSOC interchangeably. There are a number of different lists that can be found on the internet to describe the functions or capabilities that a security operations center requires. One list may split a capability into multiple parts, while another may combine two or more capabilities under one general category. Being able to recite a specific list is not important, but understanding the capabilities that are required is critical to understanding what a security operations center does. Here is one list of essential capabilities. Gathering data is just what it sounds like. The SOC will monitor the organization's network and what is occurring on it. It can do this with specific monitoring tools, and it can also gather information from log files from the systems connected to the network. The SOC needs to do more than just gathering the data. Once it has it, an analysis needs to be conducted on the data to determine the current state of the network and to provide the situational awareness that we discussed before. An analysis of the data may lead to the detection of an ongoing attack, or it may provide indicators of a pending attack that may just be in the reconnaissance stage at the moment. Obviously, alerts will be provided to Security Operations Center personnel about the presence of an ongoing or pending attack, but it is also very important to provide a recommendation to security personnel on what steps should be taken. Should certain IP addresses be blocked, or maybe certain port numbers? Is there a software patch that needs to be installed? The recommendation could take a number of different forms. If an ongoing attack is occurring, a system penetration, for example, it will become very important very quickly to conduct an investigation using forensic techniques to determine how the penetration occurred, when it occurred, and what the extent of the damage may be. Information gathered in the investigation may lead to additional recommendations, such as restoring services from backup files taken before the breach occurred. A capability some forget is to share information on your attack with other organizations that may be in the same sector or that may be running the same or similar applications. Ongoing communication and collaboration with other organizations is actually an essential part of a security operations center. When an incident occurs, a report will ultimately need to be generated providing details of the incident. This is to help strengthen the organization's security to avoid a similar occurrence in the future. Depending on the sector the organization is in, as well as the laws in the state where the organization resides, there may also be some formal reporting that must occur to law enforcement or regulatory agencies. The last item, automated, is not a step in the sense that the other items were. Instead, it is a statement that because of the speed of our networks today and the vast amounts of data involved, as much of this process needs to be done in an automated manner as possible. Every time a human is introduced into the process, it will slow the overall process down. This is not to say that humans should be eliminated from the process, but if there are elements that can be accomplished automatically, then they should, and interjecting humans into the process should occur when an important decision needs to be made. As mentioned on the previous slide, there are a number of different lists describing the key functions or capabilities of a security operations center. Here is another list from the internet. Take a look at the differences and similarities between the two. You can see where overlapping occurs and also the possible additional capabilities that might be considered when implementing your security operations center. There are multiple ways to model the potential threat to our system from various actors using various means to determine the potential outcome and severity. The term threat refers to a person, organization, or natural event that may want to or has the ability to cause a negative event to occur to your organization. It is often used to refer to the outcome of a given situation as well. A threat analysis is the process to determine what threats exist to your organization, what vulnerabilities exist that the threat could exploit, the likelihood that the threat actor will act to exploit the vulnerability, and the outcome and its severity if the act does occur. What we are concerned with is basically, given the current situation, how likely is it that a specific negative outcome will occur and what might be the impact if it does. Conduct a search on the internet for the term threat matrix and you can find a number of versions of this chart with a varied number of rows and columns. The terminology will also vary between the models, but they all have the same goal: to help put in context the things that you need to concentrate on the most in your environment. How this applies to a security operations center environment is important to understand. Threat matrices are used by organizations to determine where to concentrate their limited resources. They take a look at the various vulnerabilities and threats that exist for their organization and their computer assets, and they determine how likely the vulnerability will be exploited by a threat actor and what the impact will be to the organization if it does occur. For a security operations center, if something like a new vulnerability is discovered, the Security Operations Center will need to determine the same sort of thing we just mentioned. How likely is it that this new vulnerability will be exploited, and what will be the impact if it is? Based on the answers to these questions and the result of the evaluation, the Security Operations Center can make a recommendation as to what to do and how quickly it needs to be accomplished. Let's look at a possible example. Suppose your organization uses a software application for which a new vulnerability has been discovered. A patch exists, but that would require you to take your system offline for a period of time during which no production can take place, costing the organization thousands of dollars in losses. The likelihood that the vulnerability will be exploited is determined to be likely because an exploit has already been written to take advantage of the vulnerability and is available online. If it is exploited, the damage would potentially be catastrophic because it could negatively impact your manufacturing process. Thus, it is determined that the risk to your organization is extreme in this case. This can then be used to evaluate whether it is worth the downtime to patch the vulnerability. In this case, it would seem that this would be the right choice to make, and a recommendation can be made to patch the system. For this analysis to occur, the Security Operations Center needs to have a good handle on the situational awareness of the organization's network, current cybersecurity alerts, and should know what systems and software the organization is using to be able to determine if a new vulnerability even applies. There are a number of ways to go about conducting a threat analysis. STRIDE is one such threat modeling approach used by Microsoft. STRIDE was developed in 1999. STRIDE-LM, which is displayed here, added lateral movement to the list of threats and was proposed in 2019. STRIDE is an acronym for the threats, or actually the threat vectors, as shown on the chart. Each is associated with a specific cybersecurity property that it can impact, such as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The chart also includes a short definition for each part of STRIDE and the security controls that can be used to protect against the threat vector being successful. The original thought on the use of STRIDE was to utilize it during software development and implementation to avoid vulnerabilities in the first place. From a Security Operations Center standpoint, a model such as this, or any other model your Security Operations Center chooses to use, should be used to evaluate new events or vulnerabilities to determine the likelihood that it can be used against your organization, the possible outcome if it is used, and the impact that this would have on the organization. Generally, some of this may already have been accomplished when a vulnerability is announced. The announcement will describe what the vulnerability will expose the organization to, such as spoofing, information disclosure, or denial of service. It will be up to the analyst to determine what the actual impact might be to the organization. The announcement will also often include where to obtain a patch if it exists, or possible ways to mitigate the impact of the vulnerability. The Security Operations Center may also use this information in formulating its own recommendations. A related term to threat analysis is that of threat analyst. A threat analyst is basically the individual who is going to perform the threat analysis. They will monitor the data being gathered to help detect malicious activity. A threat analyst needs to have a certain amount of problem-solving skills and should know how to conduct research into different activities to see what they may indicate. The individual should also be good at spotting patterns and should have a knowledge of cybersecurity to be able to spot unusual activity and understand what it may mean. The individual will not only be responsible for being part of the process to detect and analyze threat activity, they need to have the knowledge of cybersecurity that will allow them to make recommendations on a course of action based on the current activity. A threat analyst should also have an understanding of the process of forensics that includes what the legal requirements are for gathering data that may be used by law enforcement in the prosecution of any criminal activity. A SIM tool is a tool often associated with security operations centers. It combines the functions of security information management and security event management. Log files from different systems and devices across the network will be gathered to allow for an analysis of the current status of the network to provide a real-time view of network activity. Suspicious activity may then be flagged and alerts generated to notify Security Operations Center personnel of possible security-related issues. This diagram illustrates part of what the SIM is designed to do. Here it is gathering information from a variety of sources, such as a firewall, intrusion prevention system, a server, and other devices. This data gathered from across the network is then combined to provide a single image of what is happening instead of providing multiple images. The image presented may indicate suspicious activity, such as attacks on various devices, or it may indicate other network performance issues. Data aggregation and analysis in a security operations center is a critical capability. SIM tools preceded a newer technology in aggregating data. Security Orchestration Automation and Response, or SOAR tools, also will aggregate data from different tools, including external sources outside of the devices on the network. SOAR tools, as the name implies, accomplish three main functions: threat and vulnerability management, security incident response, and security operations automation. This diagram illustrates what we just said were the functions of a SOAR tool. You have the security orchestration and automation aspects, an incident response platform, and threat intelligence information from external sources. The continual path surrounding the diagram shows the phases that the SOAR tool will go through. First, detecting when an incident is in progress, then doing some immediate triage to fully evaluate the impact and to quickly start the containment process. This transitions quickly into a full-blown response to the incident. Prioritization can take place at a couple levels, prioritizing the response and recovery activities to correspond with what is determined to be of most importance for the organization. The concept of a playbook is not unique to security operations centers. Anybody who has been involved in organized team sports will have experienced them, as they are designed to describe plays that the team may use during a game. The choice of which play to use at any given moment is influenced by the activities of the opponent. A Security Operations Center playbook serves a similar purpose. It consists of a number of possible actions that can be taken depending on the current security situation. The SOC playbook will contain the processes and procedures for SOC analysts when security-related activity is detected. Let's look at how a playbook might be used in a security operations center. In this case, suppose a user received an email they believed might be a phishing attempt. They forward it to the security operations center due to the training they have received on what to do with suspicious emails. When the security operations center receives it, they consult their playbook to find the part that covers phishing. They then follow the steps defined for what to do with suspicious email. The playbook then has options to attempt to best address the situation. First, it checks to determine if there is a suspicious URL or an attachment to the email. If so, then the steps in the playbook continue until all appropriate actions take place. If the email contains neither of these items, then it ends the activity. Operation that is becoming more common in organizations is that of threat hunting. Previously, the normal process of detecting intrusions centered around reactive measures. Administrators would monitor networks and systems and look for indicators of intrusive activity. The assumption was that unless you noticed something, then you were probably safe. With threat hunting, there is an acceptance of the fact that being able to always spot intrusive activity when it occurs may not happen, and, in fact, your systems may already be compromised without you being aware. Threat hunting is a proactive process where security personnel assume that the system or network may already be compromised, and an investigation is needed to find where this may have occurred. There are a number of different ways that threat hunting can occur, but the process will generally include these steps in some form and order. First, the hypothesis is made that the system may have been compromised, and what might already have occurred to the system is articulated. Second, data is collected that might indicate the system may have been compromised in the ways identified in the hypothesis statement. Third, an analysis is conducted on the collected data to see if there might be an indication of compromise. Fourth, if there are sufficient indicators to point to a possible compromise, an investigation can be launched to gather additional information and to be able to determine if malicious activity has occurred. Finally, if malicious activity is confirmed, then the appropriate response is determined so that the system can be recovered. Log management sounds like somewhat of an innocuous item, but it is absolutely critical to the functioning of a security operations center. In fact, it is so important that the Center for Internet Security lists log management as one of its critical security controls. Management of logs includes all aspects from creation to deletion, which means generation of the various files, the transmission of the log files from the source producing them to where they can be analyzed, storage of the log files for analysis when needed, the actual analysis of the files, and ultimately the disposal of the files when they are deemed no longer of use. One final aspect of log management deals with the security of the logs themselves. If we are going to be relying on them to determine the current security state of our systems and networks, we need to be able to trust that they have been securely generated and maintained, and that they have not been modified by attackers. Log files are frequently one of the first targets of attackers in a successful attack in order for them to hide their activity. This completes the materials for Lesson 2. It's time to check your understanding of the material just presented. The most important functions of a SOC are security monitoring and detection / handling of security incidents, providing a real-time picture of current network activity, collaboration and information sharing, or reports and recommendations for improving security. The answer is security monitoring and detection / handling of security incidents. The other items are also part of what a SOC provides, but the most important functions arguably are to monitor systems in order to be able to detect and then handle security incidents. A threat, check all that apply, is an entity willing to or capable of exploiting a vulnerability in your organization, a vulnerability that can be exploited in a system or network, the potential negative outcome of an attack on a system or network, or may be a person, organization, or natural event such as a hurricane. The answer is an entity willing to or capable of exploiting a vulnerability in your organization. It can be a person, an organization, or a natural event such as a hurricane. This technology addresses the three capabilities of threat and vulnerability management, security incident response, and security operations automation. Is it SIM, SOAR, log management, or real-time threat monitoring and analysis? The answer is SOAR. Remember that SOAR stands for Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. A Security Operations Center playbook essentially serves to provide various courses of action for detected or suspected activity depending on the current security situation. Is this statement true or false? The answer is true. A playbook is similar to a playbook in sports, where a number of options have been worked out in advance for a variety of situations that might arise during a game. This ends Lesson 2 of Module 1.